there's literally no changing unless you see differently, unless you understand differently. There's no changing. So everything I offer you is a chance to see in a different way. And that's why I pray for understanding, because I pray that you see it the way God showed it to me. This is called I Found Jesus. Matthew 16. When Jesus came to the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, some Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." And he said unto them, "But whom do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, and he said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered, and he said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed it unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say unto you that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." How many can feel the stagnation of the church? Like over the last, I don't know, maybe over the last decade, it seems like the church is stagnated. It's almost like, it seemed like there was advancement, but now it seems like it's just existing. The word stagnation is a state of not flowing or moving. It's the lack of activity, growth, or development. The way to the kingdom is ever increasing. The kingdom way is the kingdom road, the highway, or the path of progress. If the church is stagnated on the way, there's got to be a reason. On the path of ever-increasing advancement to the kingdom, there are gates Jesus is talking about. This is something that's interested me for a long time, that there are gates. And he calls them the gates of hell, or he refers to it as the gates of hell. So what happens is, and I actually saw this in a vision as I was sitting in the presence of God. I actually saw this in a vision. Is what happens is that the church advances as far as the next locked gate. And at that locked gate, there is no potential to advance. And so at that locked gate, they merely congregate, happily believing that they've arrived or that they've gone as far as they're called to go. But the solution is in obtaining the key. Because the keys of the kingdom are keys of advancement. Look at verse 18 again. "And I say unto thee, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." In my career as a professional Christian, I've heard very few sermons on the gates of hell. How many have heard many sermons on the gates of hell? Some, a couple. And I've never heard one that came from someone that could see. Have you ever heard something and you went, it just didn't satisfy something? Did you ever hear somebody preach something and you went, there was still something missing in that? I've never heard anything on the gates of hell prevailing against the church that I said, that guy could really had real good understanding. The keys of the kingdom allow the church to advance past the gates of hell, which desperately attempt to prevail against her. In Malachi chapter 3, God says, "I'm the Lord and I change not." How many have heard him say that? So when Christians hear those words, it brings them great comfort. Why? Because we're creatures of habit, and we have a desperate need for the familiar, and so we're glad that God doesn't change. Isn't it true? How many have ever been around somebody who changed? They're kind and gentle, and they're psychotic. We need the familiar. We need that which brings us comfort. But you need to remember, just because the Lord doesn't change, doesn't mean He doesn't do new things. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The thing that has been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done. And there's no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it can be said, see, this is new? It has already been of old time, which was before us. There's no remembrance of former things. Neither shall be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. I like Solomon. He said there's nothing new to the way of God. But Solomon said that we have no remembrance of what has been before us, so it'll still be new to us. You understand that, right? He said, God says, I don't change, but you have no idea what I'm like. That's basically what God was saying. You don't know my plan. You don't know my way because I don't change, but it's over all this time that we have no ability to record. New is always unfamiliar. How many are intimidated by new? Have you ever gone to a new doctor or a new dentist? How many are nervous? You go in. How many don't like people in their mouth? I don't like people with things that... I use drills at work, and I know what drills can do. And I don't like guys with drills drilling things inside my mouth. I don't appreciate it. I've been to the dentist one time in the last 35 years. I was there last year and they said, why did you even come? Your teeth are perfect. I said, I have no idea. It's the thing to do. But new things are intimidating, aren't they? They're unfamiliar, so they become intimidating. The great motivation, you ready? For stagnation is the fear of the unknown. Why does the church stagnate? For fear of the unknown. Remember this. God punished Israel with a 40-year hike in the desert because of one thing. They were afraid of the unfamiliar. We'd rather go back to what's familiar. We fear this. This is something we've never done. This is a place we've never been. These are teachings we've never heard. This is stuff that's unfamiliar. Makes us feel uncomfortable. I sweat. And I don't like it. Psalm 18. In my distress I called upon the Lord, and I cried unto my God, and He heard my voice out of His temple, and my cry came before Him, even into His ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of the hills moved and were shaken, because He was angry. There went up smoke out of His nostrils, and fire out of His mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under His feet. He rode upon a cherub and He flew. Isn't that an amazing picture of God? Yet He flew upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness His secret place. His pavilion round about Him were dark waters and thick clouds in the skies. How many really like this God? It's filled with mystery and terror. David said, in my distress, I called upon God. I want you to understand something. If you get nothing else from this sermon today, I want you to understand this one thing. If your spiritual advancement doesn't cause you stress and distress, then you are not advancing. Your advancement spiritually will distress you. And if it doesn't, you're not advancing. If you did it easy, you're not advancing. If it comes and you just embrace it, you're not advancing. How many understand that God has, for some reason, equipped Satan to be a worthy opponent? There's literally zero ground in the spirit realm taken without a terrible struggle. You think you can just go out and whip the devil because you're you? How many know he's been doing this a long time? Longer than you've been you. When I was a kid in elementary school, this was way back, We had a piano in every classroom. How many remember having a piano in the classrooms when you were in elementary school? A couple of you. Some of you are older than me. You don't remember that. It's because there were no pianos then yet. But the piano was probably a fairly new invention, and it was there when I was a kid. And they had them in the classrooms. And they had teachers who played them. In my class, we had a teacher always who played. And it was amazing. And they taught us songs. And a lot of Christian songs and Negro spirituals. That's what we sang in the 60s. And we sang rousing Christian songs. One was called, I remember singing all the time, Onward Christian Soldiers. How many remember singing that song? We sang this in school. I was in like 2nd grade with Mrs. Hirschberger. Onward Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Onward then, ye people, join our happy throng, blend with ours your voices in the triumph song. We were always marching. We would march in class. We were marching as to war, but we were never marching into war. We believe that Satan is defeated. And so the battle has become more like a Civil War reenactment or a scripted professional wrestling match. Isn't it true? We say Satan's defeated, Jesus is champion, and we cruise. And guess what? No ground is taken. Jesus said the violent take everything by force, didn't he? He didn't say you dress up in reenacting clothes and pretend. It's not a pretense. There's everything, every inch of ground you will gain as a believer, you will struggle in distress for it. Psalm 18:6 again. In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even to his ears. How many find themselves crying to God, on your face, crying, begging, pleading, crying out like you're losing your mind, except anyone else besides me? You know what distress is? Distress is trouble and anguish. It's crushing tribulation, oppressive. It's a continually narrowing way. That's what David said. In my distress. We used to sing a song that said, I'm trading my sorrows. I'm trading my pain. I'm laying them down for the joy of the Lord. In Christianity, the battle has become mere pretense. In 1861, the first Civil War land battle was called the Battle of Bull Run. How many were there? It was also called the First Battle of Manassas. Not the Battle of Manassas that you know, but the first Battle of Manassas was the Battle of Bull Run. The majority of the troops on both sides were green. Both sides, the North and the South, it's the first land battle. There was one at the fort that they had the little bit of skirmish, but this was the first time when the two armies, the armies of the North and the South came together, and both sides were sure of a quick victory. Both sides. They knew that they were going to see the other side turn and run, and it was going to be instant victory. These are young men. There are boys there, 15, 16, 17 years old. The whole thing was so downplayed that there were men and women, get this, who positioned themselves on hillsides with picnic baskets to watch the entertainment. This is well documented. I've read documents on this many times. The battle became so violent, they had no idea that war looked like this, that the people on the hillsides ended up fleeing in panic and terror as the battle raged on. How many believe that it was God's will for Lincoln to fight to preserve the Union? How many believe that God willed that Abraham Lincoln would fight to preserve the Union? Because you know that's why he fought, right? Was to preserve the Union. And we believe that today as we look at the North and the South. And we believe that God had his hand in it because he wanted the United States to be a formidable opponent, because he knew that there were things coming like Japan and Germany and the Adolf Hitlers. And God knew that all these things were coming. He saw it, and he knew that a divided nation would never be able to defeat these powers, and so he kept it together. And the battle was worth it, wasn't it? There was so much bloodshed, but it was worth it. If it was God's will, get this, I want you to think, if it was God's will, why did he just wipe out the rebels? The American Civil War was a terrible 4-year blood-covered struggle. And they're not positive, but they said there was at least anywhere from 620,000 to 750,000 people who lost their lives. Well over 500,000 to 750,000 and up who lost their lives. So if this was God's will, why did that many people lose their lives? In the prophetic vision that God gave Rick Joyner in The Final Quest, how many remember that book we used to hand it out? Rick saw the army of God. I always think of this. And he said that to see the army of the Lord was discouraging. He said those that had any armor at all, the majority of those that had any armor at all had only 1 or 2 pieces of armor. He said many were already wounded. Very few were adequately trained or prepared. Very few even thought this was a real war. He said that he saw a large mob that were overly happy, as if intoxicated, singing, happy, 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 happy are the people whose God is the Lord. Remember we used to sing those songs? Overly intoxicated, acting like they're not even in their right minds. He said they were playing games, singing songs. He said they were feasting and roaming from one camp to the next, going from church to church, eating and just getting filled. Rick said he shouted to them that the battle was about to begin. He said only a few even heard him. He said, those who heard me just gave me the peace sign, as if to say, all's well. They told him that they dwelt in this place of joy and peace, and they believed that no harm could come to them. Exodus 17. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose out men and go fight with Amalek. Tomorrow, and I'll stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek, and Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Amalek are the descendants of Esau, the Amalekites. They're the descendants of Esau. Anytime you read Esau, you know it's always a type of the flesh, the carnal realm, the natural way of seeing and believing. That's Esau. The natural way, and I know that we look at the natural ways, or the carnal way, and we think that it's talking about, the way of Esau is cigarettes and whiskey and wild, wild women. But that's not it. It's the natural way of thought, or the carnal way of thought. The natural way is what Jesus talked about in Matthew 6, when he repeatedly said, take no thought for your life. Take no thought for your life. Take no thought for your life. Esau trades spiritual things. The way of Esau is always to trade spiritual things for self-preserving natural things. Esau loves the natural realm, the natural world. And so he trades the deep spiritual things for the natural things that this generation calls blessings. Moses tells Joshua, he says, form an army to go out and fight against Amalek. Form an army. You're going to war. This is the church. He says you're going out to fight. The word fight is Hebrew. It means you're going out to destroy them, to devour them, to overcome them. You're going to war. How many know war is not like pretense? Again, he didn't say, this is scripted. You'll come down off the top ropes with the big elbow and you'll pin him in, after 14 minutes. He says you're going out to fight. You're going to destroy them. This is going to be a battle. You're going to war. Fight is always a violent struggle. A violent confrontation. Isaiah 9 says, every battle of the warrior is filled with confusion and noise and garments rolled in blood. That's what he said. Every battle of the warrior is filled with confusion, filled with noise, and garments rolled in blood. We don't understand that in modern America. We don't understand battle. We don't understand loss. We understand pretense. Moses says, go fight Amalek, while Aaron and Hur and I stand on the hill above you spectating. He says, we're going to go up on the hill and just watch. Look at verse 11. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. How many understand that Scripture is always a bit vague? It's like whenever Jesus died, it says, and they crucified him. How many know that the violence of crucifixion is let out in that? And they crucified him and they cast dice for his garments. They don't talk about the pain and the agony of driving the nails. They don't talk about when they drop the cross down in and dislocate the joints in the arms and in the wrists. They don't talk about the fact that the person's hanging there, not even able to get a breath, and they have to raise themselves up on that nail driven through their ankles. They have to push against that painful nail driven, and just to be able to get a breath, and then sag back down onto the nails driven through. They don't say that. They say, and they crucify him. They just downplay. The words can't describe the agony. The words can't describe the distress. He says, and so they go out to war, and Scripture's a bit vague. When Moses lifted his arm, it says Israel prevailed. And when Moses let his arms down, Amalek prevailed. What does that mean? As long as Moses had strength to hold his arms up, Israel had the courage to fight. This is literally what it's talking about. Israel became brave when Moses held up his arms. There was a courage that came over them. But when Moses lost his strength, Israel was filled with fear and began to be destroyed. How many believe it was God's will that Israel would destroy Amalek? So why does he make them violently struggle and die for it? If it's God's will, why didn't God destroy Amalek? How many know we don't understand the ways of God? How many ever look at your life and say, why do I have to struggle like this? Because we don't understand the ways of God. Every inch you will ever take in this battle that's called spiritual, you will struggle. Nothing comes. Nothing is given. Nothing comes easy. God's way to all things is through violent struggle. Human nature, the human nature's way is to decrease struggle as we go. How many remember the struggle of youth? How many remember when you were young, you're first out of school, struggling to get a job, struggling to buy a vehicle, struggling to... Everything you did was a struggle, wasn't it? You worked long hours. I said to Daniel, I said, how many hours do you work a week? He said, well, let's think about it. He said, I work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so add that up. I said, that's like a lie. He goes to bed at midnight and gets up at 6 and back at it again. It's a struggle. Life's a struggle. But the human nature way is to delete the struggle as we go, isn't it? You try to save some money. You never do. You try. God's way is an ever-increasing struggle forward. This is why the majority, listen, will never advance far in pursuit of the kingdom. Why? The cost is too great. It costs too much. You say you want it. How bad do you want it? In the natural realm, the desire of humanity is to advance into an ever-increasing ease. You build a home, you raise your children, you work long hours, you try to gather some sort of financial stability. Why? Why do we do this? So that when we're old and without strength, we can relax a little. Isn't it true? Isn't that the way of humanity? Look at Luke 12:19. And I'll say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. How many like the thought that you would have enough money? I'm not saying you do, but like the thought that you would have enough money that it would just be okay. I saw a thing that says, I want to be rich. I don't want to be ridiculous rich. I just want to be able to change my oil when it's due to be changed on time rich. Isn't that true? This is the goal of the natural life. Eat, drink, and be merry. Laid up for many years. Amazingly enough, the spirit realm works in exactly the opposite way of this. The spirit realm literally works like childbirth. The beginning is not so bad, kind of easy. Did you have a contraction? Yeah, I think I did. Remember? I think that was a contraction. Oh, I think we had a contraction. We might be getting a baby. The beginning's easy. It's kind of pleasant. You talk, you joke. But how many know that the end is violent? And the end is filled with grief and agony. Right? It's the same in war. The closer you advance to the enemy, the more violent the adversity. You've got to think this way. The closer you go to the front line, how many know the guys in the back of the line, they're eating, drinking, and being merry? They're miles away from the war. They're part of the war, but they're miles away from where the war's happening. But the closer you get, the more violent it becomes. Look at Ecclesiastes 1:13. I gave my heart to seek and search out wisdom, thy wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail is God given to the sons of men to exercise therewith. I like the way he puts it. This sore travail. Solomon says he gave his heart to wisdom, to know wisdom, follow wisdom. Whose wisdom? Wisdom is Jesus, amen? You believe that? Wasn't he the grand architect of the universe in Proverbs 8? How many have ever heard a Christian say, I've given my heart to Jesus? I've given my heart to Jesus. How do you know you're saved? I gave my heart to Jesus. I want you to know something. This simply isn't true. Your heart is your mind, your awareness, your understanding. It's your thoughts. I gave my mind, my awareness, my understanding, my thoughts to Jesus. Christians literally give their hearts to Christianity. They give their hearts to the tree of the awareness of good and evil. They call it Jesus, but it's actually a greater awareness of sin. I didn't say this would ever be easy. In order to advance, you fight, you wrestle, you distress, you struggle. Back around 17 or 18 years ago, I'm going to remember the group Delirious. We used to sing their songs. We sang a song by Delirious, and it said, well, I hear they're singing in the streets that Jesus is alive. And all creation shouts aloud that Jesus is alive. We used to sing this. Now, surely we can all be changed because Jesus is alive. And everybody here can know that Jesus is alive. And then he said, and I will live for all my days to raise a banner of truth and light, to sing about my Savior's love. And the best thing that happened was the day I met you. And then he says this, I found Jesus. I found Jesus. I found Jesus. I found Jesus. How many understand that that's actually a Christian doctrinal belief? The day you prayed the sinner's prayer is the day you found Jesus. What if you didn't? See, I ask the questions nobody else will. What if you didn't? What if you found forgiveness and cleansing of sin? What if you found hope for a heavenly eternity? What if you found acceptance into the family of God? What if you found purpose and direction? And what if all these things are to be obtained within the vehicle of Christianity? How many believe that Jesus was wisdom made flesh? How many want to find wisdom? See, the key to success isn't being able to sing, I found Jesus. It's to be able to say, I'm pursuing wisdom. Look at Proverbs 8:34 and 35. Blessed is the man that hears me. This is Jesus talking. You're okay with this, right? You're still with me. Don't shut me off. This is Jesus talking. This is wisdom. Blessed is the man that hears me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoever finds me finds life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. Whoever findeth me, the word literally in the Hebrew is whoever is able to attain or successfully reach, accomplish, or fulfill what you're called to in me. But if you believe what Christianity taught you, then you've already found Jesus. And yet here he is saying, whoever findeth me. He's not talking to the world. This isn't the world. This was written to Israel. This is written for the body of Christ. He's not saying, oh, you sinners, whoever finds me. He's talking to you. But if you believe what Christianity taught you, you believe you found Jesus, that you've already attained life, that you will not desperately seek as you believe that you already have. How many know nobody seeks desperately if they believe they already possess it? Verse 35 says, when you find wisdom, you will find life. This is key. This is literally referring to the tree of life as opposed to the tree of continual awareness of good and evil. When you find wisdom, you will find life. What's the difference? One is filled with power, the other is just religion. How do you know you found life? Then you walk in power. How many know that we need that? We can say all day long that we found Jesus, but unless there's power to back it up, it's just not so. We're just Democrats saying stuff that isn't true. Right? You can deny it all you want. The truth is right there. You can deny it all you want, but if there's no power. This is the scariest part of being a believer. The only way that you can actually say that I'm walking where I'm called is if you can walk out into the storm and say, that's enough. That you can walk up to the lifeless and say, come on up, come forth. And death obeys you. That you can walk up to the sick and lay your hand on them. And miracles happen without any effort. How many know Jesus did it effortlessly? Effortlessly. See, that's where life is. How many know there's a difference between life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? We have the awareness of sin. Woohoo! So does everyone. I just don't like Dan. I just don't like him. I don't know why I come. How many understand that God is literally the source of all things? This is really good. This is really good. God is literally, how many believe that? God is the source. Yeah. Believe that? You've got to believe it, right? How many ever need love? How many have ever met somebody that you can hardly love? One person maybe in your life. How many know that He's the source of love? How many understand that your bucket leaks? It does. How many ever get thirsty? You got to go get a drink. How many know you can't just get a drink and you're good to go? I'll never have to do that again. Right? You eat breakfast, I'm good for life. I will never eat again. It's the same with love. How many know if you need love, you got to go to the source for love? You don't have it. It's not part of who you are. He has it. He's the source. How many ever need peace? Fear comes. Torment comes. You need peace. Where do you go? To the source. He's the source of peace. How many ever need health? You need a touch from God. You're sick. You need help. How many know He's the source of health? I know that you Christianly, I know that you Christianly agree with this, but there's an even greater understanding than what you were taught. John 1. This is really good. I need you to stay with me. This gets so in depth, but it's so good, and if you can see it, you're going to go, wow, we can see that. John 1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. In the beginning was the Word. How many read that? How many understand also that the Word is wisdom? How many understand that wisdom is light? Wisdom was with God, and wisdom, it says, was God. The literal better translation is of God. The Word was with God, and the Word was of God. And I understand this is all muy confusing. That's Spanish. Next thing we tell me, you need to speak English. But I'm bilingual. Okay, you ready? I want to ask you a question, and this could potentially irritate you. Where did the Word, where did wisdom, where did light come from? It came from God. He's the source of all things. You understand that? Buckle in. Proverbs 8. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of His way. This is wisdom talking. Before His works of old, I was sent up from the everlasting, from the beginning, wherever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. There was no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. I was brought forth. One of the things Christianity struggles with is that Jesus was always right beside God doing the work. Literally, this kind of refutes that. I want to show you, this is so cool. It says, I was brought forth. The beginning of the creation of God, Jesus refers Himself to in Revelation. I was brought forth. It literally means to calve. You know what Jesus was? He was actually separated from God. This is all truth. God literally birthed wisdom out of Himself. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that awesome? Jesus literally, the reason He's the only begotten Son of God is He was literally birthed out of God. Wisdom came from God. Light, let there be light. Wisdom was drawn from the well that we know as God. Look at John 1. All things were made by Him. Without Him, nothing was made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. This verse in John is actually linked directly to Proverbs chapter 8. In him was life. In Jesus is life. In Proverbs 8 it says, whoever finds wisdom finds life. This is Proverbs 8:35. Whoever finds wisdom finds life. From the endless source that we know as God, life is drawn, and whoever finds this wisdom finds life. Not merely the religious, keep me out of hell, let me go to heaven kind of life. How many, if you're okay with that and that's all you want, that's fine. I want more. When he says about life, in him was life, that word is the Greek word zoe. This life isn't just living or being or that which staves off hell and death. Zoe life literally is a vibrating life, literally emanating creative life. Can you imagine the power source that we know as God? Can you imagine that which creates universes by speaking? The power, the authority to create just by speaking. The life that flows from this well. Look at verse 35 of Proverbs 8 again. For whoever finds me finds life and shall obtain favor of the Lord. How many want wisdom? Whoever finds wisdom finds life. Attaining wisdom will give you access to the source of life. Attaining wisdom. When you struggle and fight desperately. See, if the fight is over, the battle's over, and the victory's won. I remember singing the song. That's why I preach so many songs. Because there's so many songs that declare wrong. The battle's over, the victory's been won. We're already, Satan's defeated, and we are in that victory. We walk in that victory, and there's battle. We don't have to fight anymore. How many understand this doesn't prepare you adequately to fight? Remember when Rick Joyner saw the army of God, he said they were not adequately prepared. He said the most discouraging part of seeing them was the fact that nobody had ever prepared them for real war, real battle. You were never called to just receive, you were called to fight for it. If you don't struggle, it's not worth having. Attaining wisdom will give you access to the source of life. And then he says this, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. How many would like to know what that means? How many, when you see that, you think, oh, I will be one of God's favorites? That position's already been taken. Sorry. And shall obtain favor of the Lord. This is the literal translation in the Hebrew. Ready? And from the well of God, the well of God life, that's what it is. And from the well of God life, he shall draw. This is, if you find him, this is what you, this will be your call in life. From the well of God life, he shall draw the will of God to be done on earth as it is in heaven. From the well of God, you will draw God life. And you'll walk into a room and the demon possessed, and they'll be still. Not a struggle, not a battle, because you've obtained access to real life. The will of God will be done on earth as it is in heaven because of wisdom. Look at John 4. Jesus answered, and he said unto the woman at the well, whoever drinks of this water shall thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him shall never thirst. But the water that I give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. Do you know what your call is? As the church, do you know what your call is? Your call is to be an emanating source of creative life. The well that the very power and authority of wisdom himself flows from on earth as it is in heaven. You are to become a well where water springs up. That's what Jesus said. Water, living water, springs up. You are to become a source of life. You are to become a source of not just light, but life. Wisdom has understanding, but it also carries with it life. How bad do you want it? It's yours if you want it. How bad do you want it? Are you desperate? The Jesus that you believed you found is not the wisdom that you were called to seek. I know when you hear that, you go, oh, Dan, that irritates me. I spent 200 years searching for that. The Jesus, how many know that Jesus came easy? The Jesus that I received came easy. What was the hardest thing? Remembering the words to the sinner's prayer. Right? I mean, what was it? Trying to be nice to my brothers and sisters. I was 11. I got to give up punching. Just punch the little one. She can't talk. She doesn't remember. The Jesus that you believe you found is not the wisdom that you were called to seek. Keep seeking until the very life of God emanates from you. Think about it. You were created to carry the life of God. So Jesus said, to where life springs up from you. Haven't you ever wanted desperately to walk in that realm that Jesus walked in? How could we possibly think that what we have now will give us the key to successfully walking in the realm that Jesus walked in? How many know that they've been being born, living, and dying powerless for the last 2,000 years? Oh, once in a while we see a little power and we get excited. The church has power. Jesus said, greater works than what I do, you'll do. How many understand that there's been nobody since Jesus was here that came near to what he did? Nobody. Jesus ministered for 3.5 years. And they still either love him or hate him 2,000 years later. Why? Because he walked as the source of life in the land of death. That's your call. That's your call. Never stop seeking desperately. You haven't found. Even though you might sing, I found Jesus, you haven't found wisdom. He's still out there waiting to be found. Amen. Stand with me. Praise. Father, we worship you. We glorify your name. There is none like you. We're desperate to know you. In a church that seems to have stagnated. I think of even the global church. Where do we see a real, true move of God? And I don't believe that people even realize it. That the church that they are a part of has stagnated. Teach us the way of wisdom. Teach us the way of understanding. Teach us the way of life. That we might walk continually in pursuit of life. That we might know you, the source of life, the well from which all things are drawn, the only true and living God. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all.